Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing well. It's time to talk about the Cold War a little bit more, and we're going to move on to 13.3. Why did America fail in Korea and Vietnam? So obviously what should jump off the page at you before we get into this question is the word fail. America doesn't fail very often. We're used to winning, and when we're used to winning, anytime you talk about us losing, it had better be a clear and concise loss. And there's a lot of ways that you can look in what happened in Korea and Vietnam and decide that maybe we won, maybe we lost, maybe we didn't, maybe we tied. But we're going to discuss that word fail as we go through both of them. Now we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to do Korea as a part and then Vietnam as a part. And Vietnam mostly because it's so much longer and so much more detailed. But let's start breaking down what happened as America moved into Korea. Okay, after World War II, you notice Korea divided at a very famous landmark, the 38th parallel. Not 3630, which is the Missouri Compromise, not 5640 or 5430 or fight, excuse me, which is Canada, the United States. Another line, the 38th parallel. Anytime you see 38th parallel, it's always talking about Korea. If you remember, Germany had been divided along lines east and west. Well, Korea is going to be divided along lines north and south, and North Korea is going to be closely aligned to their boundary neighbor to the north, China. And so North Korea will be the communist half, and South Korea would be the free democratic half. They had both been controlled by Japan during World War II. Remember we talked about some of the kamikaze pilots were forced into service from Korea. Some of the comfort girls, quote unquote, that the Japanese soldiers enjoyed were kidnapped from Korea. So they have no love for the Japanese, and the Americans actually helped them fight back against the Japanese. But here we are. And as you can see, as our little Martians are recognizing, things are getting redder and redder all the time. Well, in June of 1950, the North Korean army overruns the South Koreans and drives them almost literally off the map. You can see on this map here that one little section, southeast section of South Korea around Busan, was still South Korean controlled. But they were bum rushed. Well, now if you're the United Nations, United States, you've got a very serious question to ask yourself. What do? We just got out of a war. You know, this is 1950. World War II ended in 1945. I mean, we want to go to war. You know, we just had one of those. We just broke up. And so do we just appease the North Koreans and say, okay, we'll let you have, you know, South Korea, all right, communist, you got China, that scared us, and now you got South Korea, but no more, you can't have anything else. Are we going to appease them? We're going to go to war? Now, if you remember, what's our key term coming out of our European discussion in terms of our foreign policy decision for communism? Key term starts with a C, kind of like quarantine, containment. And so the United States leads the United Nations to make the decision to contain communism, which means we're going to attack, which leads to Act 2. Act 2 is this fella, Douglas MacArthur. Remember, he was a quote-unquote hero from the Pacific War, World War II. He was the one who had returned to the Philippines. Well, MacArthur's in control, and he figures out a somewhat brilliant strategy for an amphibious invasion of Incheon. Think Incheon, like you have to inch on slowly because it's amphibious. So you look down here at the map on the bottom. Here's Japan. You go around to Korea, and they go behind all of these North Korean troops who had invaded South Korea and land right there at Incheon. You can see the amphibious invasions here, which we're pretty good at. You know, just like D-Day. This is like D-Day Junior. Okay. And so we, led by MacArthur, are able to very quickly get behind the North Korean army, which of course forces them to retreat. And as you can see in the map here, Okay, they are pushed back from this little quadrant back to the 38th parallel. Now, once we get them to the 38th parallel, the United States and the United Nations is faced with another question. What was our original goal for the Korean conflict? Notice they didn't even call it a war. Congress never declares war here. It's just at one point they referred to it as a police action. You know, anything for us not to be in a war. Can't be in a war, okay? Don't want to go to war. So anyways, what's the word that we had set for our original goal for the Korean conflict? We wanted to contain communism, which means get it to here, the 38th parallel. Well, once we get to the 38th parallel, and we did so easily, it was like, well, you know what? Maybe this time, instead of just containing communism, maybe we should take back some land from communism. And there was some back and forth, but it had been so easy that they decided, all right, let's do it. And so our troops rolled into North Korea and pushed the North Koreans all the way back to the Yalu River, the northern border between China and North Korea. Well, that brings us to Act 3. And in order to really see what Act 3 looks like, I want to show you an image from a movie. Now, in this particular movie, you might recognize Han Solo there. The United States is Han Solo. There's China, or North Korea. Notice we're chasing the North Koreans all the way back out of South Korea. Look at us chasing the North Koreans. Oh, snap, they're the Chinese. No, we just ran into a whole group of Chinese, which means it's time for us to run away. Yeah, that's basically what happened in Act 3. We drive the North Koreans all the way back to the Yalu River, and then 300,000 Chinese pour back across the Yalu River, and now we're on the run. And we're on the run so fast that many of our troops get surrounded. There's a pretty impressive moment in American military history where some Marines and Army soldiers were both basically surrounded at the Chosin Reservoir. And it took some incredible bravery, a little bit of luck. If you want, you could look up Tootsie Rolls at Chosin Reservoir. Very interesting little take at how Tootsie Rolls helped save the day. Regardless, we were stuck, frozen, difficult fighting. You can see the Chinese propaganda here. Notice they're coming against evil MacArthur. Here's evil Uncle Sam and the Chinese soldiers stopping us from throwing our bombs. You know, at this point, we have dropped more bombs on Korea than we dropped in the entire Pacific War. We are doing everything we can against Korea. But now we're on the run because of the Chinese. Well, now we're faced with another important question. What's the trump card that we have that the Chinese don't? What could we do that could escalate this war and take us to a place where we could defeat the Chinese rather easily? Well, the trump card is nuclear weapons. So could we drop nuclear weapons and then knock the Chinese out of the war? Perhaps. But China's kind of friends with the Soviet Union. And the last thing we want is to trigger the Soviet Union. And so Truman says, nope, we need to limit our warfare, so much so that we don't draw China fully into the war. And so Truman, seen by some as a little child in a military uniform, limits MacArthur. We need to be safe. We need to be smart. You know, William Tecumseh Sherman in Total War would laugh at this idea. But we fought a limited war. And because we fought a limited war, we were losing. We couldn't defeat them. And MacArthur lit into Truman in the newspapers. And because of that, Truman fires MacArthur. That's a big deal. If you remember Abraham Lincoln firing all of those Union commanders until he finally found one who could get the job done. Well, MacArthur was a very, very popular American. And it shows the power of our executive that he could make this happen. A lot of countries, that doesn't work. Generals just assassinate presidents and take over. So we fought our limited war from basically 1950 to 1953. So take a minute and write your limerick for why the limited war was a good or a bad choice in Korea. Okay, we'll move on and wrap this up with our ceasefire at the 38th parallel. So from June of 1950, basically through the end of 1950, that was Acts 1, 2, and 3, where the North Koreans invade South Korea. The United States lands at Incheon and pushes the North Koreans back to the 38th parallel. And then we drive them back to China. China pours in. And here we are 3 years later, and look where we are, still sitting at the 38th parallel. The reason it actually took so long to decide that the war was going to be over is we had all of these North Korean and Chinese prisoners of war who did not want to go home. They were like, nah, we like what's going on over here on this side. Oh, time for lunch. Just kidding. But the prisoners, we couldn't figure out what to do. So it took us about 3 years to figure out the prisoner of war deal. But finally, we signed a ceasefire, and the war ends right where it begins. Which again, helps us to ask the question, did we fail? Well, if you look at it from one perspective, what was our original goal? Contain communism. Did we contain it? Well, it didn't get any further. But then we shifted our goal in the middle of the fight. And our goal then became take back North Korea. Well, did we take back North Korea? No. And then this whole concept of not calling it a war. You know, to a certain degree, historically speaking, this war has never ended. They just signed a ceasefire. So North Korea and South Korea, we have American troops in South Korea right now along that border, making sure that North Korea stays where they're supposed to stay. You know, it's a very, sketchy situation. Google North Korea, United States, foreign relations, and you'll see all kinds of havoc. Well, it comes from this time period. We're not their favorite people by any stretch. Now, there's a good crash course. I'll show you the quick link here. Okay, if you just do Cold War in Asia, you can find a good review. It's pretty relatively short. There's plenty of good information out there. There's a PBS video on the unforgettable war, because a lot of people don't even remember anything about the Korean War. Regardless, this is your 13.3, part 1 on the Korean War.